everybody, welcome to another episode of Behind the Shot with Brian Ach. That's right, this is the show where we look at a single frame and we talk about everything that went into making that photo. And this week we've got a really good one. It is a musician, but this is not a Music Mondays. We're going to talk about a portrait. And this is a portrait of everybody's favorite, Sting. That's right. Let's bring it up right now. And there's the portrait. There is Sting. Gordon Sumner, I believe, is his real name. And this was interesting. This was taken April 23rd, 2018. This was taken at 520 West 28th Street. And if you know your New York architecture, you know that this is at the Zaha Hadid building, which is a very interesting architectural building. It's very cool. Unfortunately, that architect passed away a couple years ago, but this is an amazing building. It's probably one of my favorite buildings in New York. It is an apartment residence, and Sting had just sold his $50 million apartment, and he was renting this two-floor apartment. He was slumming, I guess. You know, he sold a $50 million apartment, and he was renting this apartment, similar to what I did in Queens for a while. After he rented this apartment, a year later, he moved to 220 Central Park South, the penthouse of that building, which he bought for a paltry $65.7 million. So Sting is not hard up for money, and that is because he has 17 Grammys and he sold 100 million records, which is 100 million more than I have sold. And I just found out that his song, Every Breath You Take, is the most played song in the history of radio, which really confused me because I was very sure it was My Heart Will Go On from Titanic, because you couldn't get away from that song for the last 30 years, even though the film hasn't even been out that long. So anyway, this is an interesting portrait because this was shot in support of an album that he came out with. He did a duet album with Shaggy, the reggae artist from Jamaica, who's a great guy. And they did a great reggae album. And if you like reggae, you should check it out because it's actually very good. It got really good reviews and it sold well and it was very cool. So anyway, he got there and he wasn't in the best mood for some reason. And I only had about 10 minutes to shoot. And he said, well, where are we going to shoot? And I said, I thought we'd do it in the bedroom. And he's like, oh, really? You usually do it out here in the living room. And I said, well, I don't want to do what everybody wants to do, which he thought was interesting. And we go in the bedroom and I said, you know, this is very cool to be in this building. And he's like, oh, yeah. And I said, because I was trying to figure out who rented this out from under me. And it's you. And he liked that. He thought that was funny. So then we loosened him up and I had the lights set up. Now for this setup, I was using 3 Elinchrom Quadra heads. They're really small, powerful heads. They're very cool. And I had 2 separate packs. These are battery packs. And if you look at the picture, I have a Westcott Rapid box, and it's shining on his face from about 5 feet away. And then the other two heads are raking the window, actually. And that's how I got the light behind him. I had a head on a really high light stand that was gridded off and it was shooting down. And then I had one that was literally shooting into the window to make it really bright and just make it a little different, give some texture, kind of depth. This was shot with a Canon 1DX. This was shot with a 24-70 f2.8L2, the second lens. It's a great lens. Obviously, it's a go-to lens. It's gravy for every photographer who does any sort of shooting, basically. This was shot at 1/160th at f2.8, and it's pretty bright, so it was ISO 100. This was shot in RAW. I shoot most of my portraits in RAW, and you should too, because generally you'll have time to tweak them and make them as perfect as you can, as opposed to an event where maybe I'm handing off the card directly to the editor and I just need the pictures out as fast as possible. This was an interesting photo because really it was about the album release and it was about the 2 of them. So the PR and everybody, totally understandable, they wanted 2 shots of everybody. They wanted it about the album. And you should always do that. You always need to do what the client wants, but you should always never accept only what they give you. So if you can deliver what they want, that gives you leeway to say, can we do solos also? And she was like, well, not really. And I said, can we do solos just for me? I won't send them out. I'll send out only the 2 shots. And she's like, yeah, that'd be totally fine. So I asked Sting if he was game. And after a couple of jokes and, hanging out a little bit, he was like, yeah, sure. So I did this shot. This probably took 1 minute because the lights were already set up and I had already thought through everything. And then we did another setup on a plain white wall because you always want the plain white wall shot. Ironically, people think plain white walls or seamless is boring, but if you look at magazine covers, it's probably 80% of what magazine covers are. So learn how to shoot on a white wall or a white seamless, and I will actually be doing a little seminar on that later. So thanks for joining me with Sting. It's too bad I couldn't have bought the apartment that he bought, but I don't have a spare $58.7 million or something like that. Anyway, thanks a lot for joining me on a Behind the Shot, and we'll talk to you later.